Once we put the demo tape on the front cover of Zap 64, and the feedback we got was immense. The phone lines at Activision didn't stop day and night. We knew we were onto a winner. It was obvious it needed a sequel before we even got it out. I think it might have been the April issue of Zap 64 where this demo was a cover mount. So I'd already had discussions with John before he'd finished the game about doing a sequel of Last Ninja, and we built that into the ending of when you're collecting the scrolls in the Shogun's castle to lead on. And so the idea being that he has transported away in time so that we could then change the environments and give a new different feel to The Last Ninja rather than just having it all in feudal Japan. We chose New York, modern day New York, and a lot of that was inspired by
I'm Conor McCloud. I am immortal.
There can be only one.
If you look at where it started off in Scotland, then he's in modern day New York. That inspired us to set the scene in the future. And then again, Last Ninja 3 is set in a different scene of elements way into the future where you've got a different graphical style as well.
So obviously, having finished Ninja 1 in sort of July, we then obviously were talking about moving on and doing the follow-up. So I moved down to a programmer house that obviously was rented, or effectively it was a house that was rented by System 3, and it became the programmer house. So I moved into that back in September, I think. And that's when Last Ninja 2 was started almost immediately. Slight complication was that at that point, still hadn't finished Ikari Warriors, which I was doing for Elite. So I had a situation whereby I was finishing Ikari Warriors, and obviously the project manager from Elite would occasionally come down to the System 3 house to see me, to see how progress was going. So it was a matter of juggling the projects. One of the things that there's a lot of feedback we had from Ninja 1 was that the controls were quite difficult. So part of that problem was down to the fact that some people's joysticks didn't do diagonal movements particularly well, other ones did them too much. So one of the things we did is introduce the ability to change the controls and rotate it, so you weren't using you were using the cardinal directions rather than diagonals for actually the major movement directions. It just meant that with different, because there were so many different sorts of joystick that you could buy at that time, that we literally wanted to try and make it as playable as possible. Obviously, back in the day, I could play it. I could jump across the swamps and the rivers without a problem. I appreciate a lot of people have moaned about that over the years and said it's absolutely impossible. But the issue here is that people had to understand that you could jump in 3 different directions, and it was relatively, you just had to choose. I went at diagonal on that, I went to steep diagonal, or then went straight across. And just knowing how you could do it, I literally, I would never die. I would just go straight across it. And simply, you watch lots of videos online, and obviously the people that were playing it for those videos similarly had got the idea of how to actually jump across them.
And I've got to say, I must have been terrible at playing games then, because I was it. And John got the nickname Pixel Perfect John, because you got to have the pixel just right. I wanted John to change that element. People still moan about it to this day, and John absolutely refused to change that before the game came out. He just would not do it.
The problem I had is that it looked really bad if you're standing on top of effectively a lily pad or a log on the river, and you move a couple of pixels and you have no longer got any tree underneath you, and you're not falling in. So the point is, I made them quite difficult. Obviously, maybe too difficult. I do accept that hindsight is a wonderful thing.
That was my biggest problem with the first Ninja game, though, was the fact that you had to have a pixel perfect landing position to actually get across. And I think it did frustrate the hell out of a load of players.
Yeah.
Was not the best part of the game, to say the least. That was the element I was most disappointed in, that we wanted to improve on with Last Ninja 2. I don't know if we did. I don't think it was as bad as the swamp in Last Ninja 1, but John is John. So, hence the name pixel perfect John that still stands to this day.
Yes, I think Ninja 2 definitely improved on Ninja 1 just because we had the experience. Obviously, the programming got more efficient. We could store more graphics. We compressed it better. So the point being, we tried to introduce more gameplay elements into it. Obviously, one of the things, when I look back at Last Ninja 1, you'd have a screen. Either it would have an object which you could pick up, or it would have an opponent. You'd never get more than that. So the point is, the screens were actually quite bare. I mean, they were graphically beautiful, but you didn't actually necessarily do very much. So
I'd also add in something else as well that a lot of people don't realise. John has been a good friend of mine for now nearly 4 decades. I mean, I've known John, not know how many years, 38 years I've known John now. When John, Mev and Hugh left System 3 to set up Vivid Image after Last Ninja 2, John still helped us when Stan Skembry took on Last Ninja 3. Stan was still in their offices. He was still being supported by John, and John's efforts to help me and System 3 still create the Last Ninja series and push it on. And I think the reason why Last Ninja 2 was the best is because it was the last one that John actually wrote. Of course, he did Ninja Remix, which was a rework to improve a lot of those things he mentioned on Last Ninja 1, and there's some other stylized improvements to Ninja that he created in Ninja Remix. But ultimately, I think that's why Last Ninja 2 was the best one, because it was the last version that John actually coded himself rather than consulting on. And sadly, Stan isn't with us anymore. He passed away. But Stan Skembry coded Last Ninja 3. Well, Last Ninja 4 actually started shortly after Last Ninja 3, and it was going to come onto the PlayStation 1. The deal was lined up with Philips Interactive. The game didn't happen. It was then far more a polygon-based game and started to go into this 3D real-world movement away from isometric, and that didn't work. They pulled out of the video games industry. They paid us off, walked away. We start again. The developers on the product at that time were internal at System 3. We had a huge studio in Harrow. And once John came back into the fold and started working with us after Putty, we looked at getting John to start on Last Ninja. This started with a number of high-res isometric attempts that we started. That didn't work because everybody wanted something to be first person or third person. And so Last Ninja ended up where you see it. Now we're in 2002. We unfortunately walk away from it. But up until 2002, you had Electronic Arts that came in. We had a signed deal with Electronic Arts. It was going to be Electronic Arts product in the late 90s. And we'd gone into these great graphics. Now, I think it was fantastic for the consoles at the time. Sadly, for whatever reason, Sony USA decided they were not going to give Electronic Arts, the Electronic Arts concept approval. And we think it's a political move. We've no idea. But there's a particular person in the American team that had made it very clear it's not going to happen. It was the only game ever in Electronic Arts history that failed to get concept approval by Sony America. So let me just explain. In those days, unlike now, before a game could go onto the PlayStation format in America, Sony America had to concept approve your product. You had to have working prototypes. You had to have a really detailed concept board. EA were blown away by it. Part of the details we'll be giving in our Diamond collection with all of the documents we're releasing is a lot of these email exchanges, the rejection by Sony America, the contract with EA, redacted, of course, and any personal details and financial details will be redacted, of course. The settlement from Philips Media, Philips Interactive will also be provided, financial details removed. So it gives people a clear idea. But shortly after EA said they can't continue if there's no concept approval in America, PlayStation would be a major part. PlayStation and certainly the American territories are around 50% of global sales at that time on console. It meant it wasn't viable for EA, which is a shame because if you look at how impressed they were as a company, it was going to be a revolutionary product. I fear that there were so many things in there that could have conflicted with Sony's God of War that came out a little bit later. I don't know. But for whatever reason, Sony wouldn't give it concept approval. However, a few years later, we had Simon & Schuster come on. They looked to publish some of our other PC titles. We showed them the working demo of Last Ninja and where we were with EA. We've made sure they showed that the EA deal had come to an end and they held no rights in it. We signed a deal with Simon & Schuster. But again, on that basis, they had to go to Sony America for concept approval. This time, they approve it, which I don't understand. Why would you not approve it before? Now you approve it. They approved it. We're going forward. But a bit like Philips, shortly after, they decided to pull out the video game industry as they were looking to make cuts and restructure their business. And that frustrated. That was the end of The Last Ninja for 2002. Some years later, John and I were talking. We wanted to recreate it. We found another coder. We wanted someone that was really experienced in some of the game engines. And we started working on Last Ninja 4 again, or showing it to Sony again. This time they're blown away. And as you'll see in the demo, this was actually the first video game where you had really great camera angles, but it was the snow effects with footprints in the snow that blew everyone away. Unfortunately, a lot of things changed. The market changed. We were not able to just fund that sort of development ourselves. Multi-million dollar production. I mean, when you're talking at this stage, just doing an intro could cost you $1 million to make. It's a big ask for a small indie publisher to put that investment in. And we were close to signing a deal in 2019 to get it tied up with someone that will remain nameless. But effectively, COVID happened and that terminated The Last Ninja 4. That's when it all stopped in terms of development. Once COVID came, we still think about it. We're still working on concepts. We're still working on other coding ideas, but we had to walk away from it at that point. It may be that Last Ninja 4 does come back later down the line. We want it to come back, but it's very difficult. And the whole reason why we are forced to do collector's editions and sell them on Kickstarter is the death of retail. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at GameStop, they're pretty much non-existent across Europe now. They're closing down many, many stores. If you look at the Game UK, it's the same scenario, but Game UK was taken over by Mike Ashley. They're now part of Sports Direct. They're more of a plush toy kind of outlet. Of course, they do some very top-end games. But the way distribution worked before the pandemic was very, very straightforward. You had various distributors around the world. You've got game concepts, you've got working demos, and you do exclusive distribution deals territory by territory. And people would guarantee that depending on how good the game is, they would buy this amount or this amount. If it's really good, it's this amount. And so on that basis, we had a forecast of how we could make money, how we could make our money back. By now just selling digitally, and with the advent of Game Pass bastardizing the whole digital market, it makes making a game like this for a small company like us very, very, very difficult.
If you want to be part of preserving these iconic 7 retro games from the Last Ninja series, International Karate, IK Plus, and Bangkok Nights by bringing them to PlayStation 4 and 5, Nintendo Switch, Xbox and PC, then please do check out the campaign, where every tier includes having you, the fan, having your name added to this compilation. The Last Ninja Collection lets you relive these iconic retro classic games just as you remember them, with the option to choose the system you grew up with, whether it's the C64, Amiga or Spectrum. Plus, for those back in the Diamond tier level, you gain access to demos of unreleased games like The Last Ninja 4 and International Karate ++. These are titles that never made it to the market and were abandoned. We're also including copies of the original concept designs, storyboards, and even redacted contracts and correspondence with former partners like EA, Activision, Philips Interactive, Simon & Schuster, and many more. This gives you, the fans, the full history and contributes to the preservation of these iconic retro games as part of video game preservation. These games mean the world to me and the rest of the team at System 3, who just simply couldn't be happier to finally bring them to you via this very limited Kickstarter release. So please do share this update to help make this collection a reality. Also keep an eye out for more updates, as we have plenty of never before seen or heard behind the scenes information. We plan to release these before the campaign is through. This exclusive, one-of-a-kind limited edition pack is available only on Kickstarter. You can find the link in the description below. Don't miss out. So from everyone here at System 3, thank you for your support.